Best Book Bits podcast brings you Forrest Dombrow, a serial entrepreneur and sales consultant with 18 years experience in the online marketing industry, and is the author of Clone the Ace, a battle-tested blueprint to sell digital marketing services like a pro. Forrest, thanks for being a guest on the show.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
No worries. Now, for an audience who might not know you, let's go back in time. Who is the 18-year-old Forrest? What were you doing and what were you dreaming of?
Man, that was a long time ago. The 18-year-old Forrest was wanted to be a toy inventor. Was definitely a serial entrepreneur from an early age. Kind of my father instilled that in me. He used to tell me bedtime stories about how to start businesses and stuff. And I was definitely the kid out in front of the house trying to sell stuff, usually my mom's stuff that she then got pissed about. So, just had that entrepreneurial start, was athletic and excited to build an empire.
Why did you want to become a toy inventor? What was that motivation?
I'm trying to remember what triggered it, but, junior year of college, people start thinking about what do I want to be after college, and maybe I should get an internship, that kind of stuff. I for several years had run an ice cream delivery business in my hometown, so I was already very entrepreneurial. And I just started reading books, and I came across, I think it was this concept that toy inventors could come up with a concept and then license it and get royalties forever. And I read all these stories. So it was this concept of licensing and royalties, and just, I don't know, I was just attracted to toys, and I just thought that was a really cool career path.
Yeah, perfect. And what got you into sort of what was the next job finishing school? You were selling popcorn, dial-up internet sales job. Is that correct? How did the sort of unfold after you finished school?
Yeah, it's been an eclectic path. I actually went to law school, so I'm a licensed attorney. Realized I didn't want to do that, so I got into sales for a little bit, and then started as you mentioned, a gourmet popcorn company. Sold that. Opened a wine and liquor store with some friends. Sold that. And then during that period, got into marketing. So became a digital marketing manager, was terrible at sales, as I talk about in the book. And I was really more of a marketer, working with the clients. Got into persuasive copywriting and conversion rate optimization before that was really a thing many, many years ago. And that just blossomed into then leaving and starting my own digital marketing agency, which was very successful. Sold my shares of that to my partners because they didn't really want to grow, and I had outsold all of our capacity several times. And they wanted me to kind of roll back in and start doing digital marketing again, but I had really grown to love sales, and so I didn't want to do that. So we're still friends. They're still going strong, and I moved more into sales consulting. Started a bunch of other businesses along the way, some successful, some not, but really started to focus on sales for the last 10 to 15 years, both as a salesperson for my own agency and then as a consultant under Solve Sales, which is my current company. Yeah.
Talk to me about your current company and who are the clients you serve, and what's the expertise in the business?
Yeah. So Solve Sales is about 6 or 7 years old, but in the middle, one of my clients, who's a digital marketing agency, recruited me to kind of take over sales and business development. So technically they were always a client, but I really went in and refined all the sales processes and systems that I had developed when I was doing sales for my own agency. When I left, I wanted to, be a professional speaker. And so I started creating a presentation, and the presentation kept getting longer and longer and longer. And I said, you know what? I ought to just write a book about it. And so it was all about my sales processes and systems that I developed, very specific to digital marketing agencies, which is what the book's about. Solve Sales, though, has evolved beyond just digital marketing agencies. So we would say we're business to business sales consultants. So anybody that sells a more complex service, software companies, research companies, environmental consulting companies that have a more strategic sales process, we help them help differentiate themselves, optimize their sales process. We do sales training and coaching. And so it's really a comprehensive approach to improving and scaling your sales function if you're a B2B service provider.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that makes sense of how the book came out. So you got the book there in your hand. Hold it up. Show us the book. What it looks like. Clone the Ace. When did it come out, and how's it been received so far?
Yeah, it just came out last March, so a little bit less than a year. It's been very well received. I've got some very cool unsolicited emails from people saying this changed our whole business. I just closed the biggest deal we've ever had, and the customer said exactly what you said they would say right after we did the presentation. And so I've just had a lot of really rewarding feedback that people are actually making more money using the book.
Yeah, great. And we're going to jump into the book as well. So this podcast is about interviewing authors and their books and going through sort of the best book bits, as they say in the thing. So let's jump into it. So I read the book recently, an amazing book. So congratulations on it's a fantastic sales and marketing book. And I like the history where you go back and talk about some great stories. So one of the first stories that I read in the book is about McDonald's and their speedy service system. Do you want to sort of rant or unpack that and tell us a little bit about how McDonald's started with their systems and processes with the speedy service system?
Yeah, there was a movie a number of years ago, The Founder, which kind of went into this. And so I think a lot of people are somewhat familiar, but if you're not, it's just the story of Ray Kroc, who went to the first McDonald's Brothers restaurant. They only had one of them, and ended up growing it by creating systems and processes that could be repeatable by even average cooks. You didn't have to be a whiz if you just followed the steps. And so that's kind of the premise of the whole book. And the title, Clone the Ace, is if you have a great cook and you can document their process and make that efficient, make it repeatable, that's how you can bring in salespeople more easily and clone the performance of the top salespeople. And that's kind of how that story sets the stage for the rest of the book.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, some of the things I got from it was in the book you talk about some of the tasks and skills needed to run a basic sales system. And I think a lot of companies are missing out that documentation process on a business. Yeah. The value of a business is based on their documentation system on how can this be replicated by other people, and how can you get the average Joe to come in to that system and then work that system efficiently as well. So yeah, it started off with that, and then you jump into a name I'm familiar with as well, and we can talk about it. But who is W. Edwards Deming to you and people that don't know that name? Who is that person?
Yeah, well, he was a person that helped really drive the importance of systems in a business. And he's got so many great quotes and information that really illuminated exactly what I was trying to say. Sometimes you're trying to say something, you're trying to get a point across, and someone has just said it perfectly. And so I found in his material and his teachings around business systems and processes, kind of a kindred spirit, even though he's since, deceased, in terms of putting a process in place to really help people. Back to what you were just saying with regards to McDonald's and documentation, one of the things, examples I use, and it relates to Deming, is Legos, building Lego sets. So a lot of people have seen the big Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. It's one of their biggest, most complicated sets. It has 7,500 pieces. And the thing about Legos is you can look at that and say, well, if you just threw a pile of Legos on someone's desk and said, build me the Millennium Falcon, even the best builders would struggle, right? But as anybody that's built Legos knows, it doesn't just come with a pile of Legos. It comes with all the Legos neatly organized in different bags, and it's got step-by-step documentation. Step one, put this piece with this piece. And so with that type of documentation and process, even a 10-year-old could build the Millennium Falcon, no problem.
Yeah, and I think that's why Lego is so successful as well. It's not just for the kids and adults, but it's that booklet, it's that step-by-step guide where you can feel comfortable to put together that Millennium Falcon, as you say. Yeah, I'm a massive Lego fan myself. So, yeah, I do like the idea of going back in time where you started with the book on how these systems and sales processes came about as well. Some of the other takeaways I got from the book as well is like to scale your sales function, you need a repeatable system.
Right.
And another thing I got from it, to avoid, you don't need to hire these expensive sales unicorns. You need to break down your system into specialized steps and take a team selling approach. So give me some examples of companies you've worked with and how you've gone in there and how you work with, let's say small to medium companies that want to scale and grow. What's the first sort of steps you do when you go in there as a, digital marketing agency?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing we do, which any good consultant would do, is diagnosis. I like to use a doctor analogy a lot. Before I'm going to tell you what you need to do or fix, I need to diagnose the problem. And I'm very big on going to root causes. A lot of people want to treat symptoms. So the first step is always diagnostic process. And we look at 10 key areas from what is your unique value proposition and story? Because if you go to market, you try to sell stuff, regardless of whether you have a process or not, if your products or services are inferior, you're dead in the water. So we really take a methodical approach at looking at unique value, marketing. We're not a marketing agency, but obviously I have a big marketing background. So we like to make sure that people are generating enough leads. And then from there, it's all about that sales process, right? What is step one? When we go in, we find that a lot of people are skipping steps. For example, a common one is, especially in smaller and medium-sized businesses, is a prospect calls up, they have a quick phone call. They're almost like order takers at McDonald's, right? And the person says, I need help with X, Y, and Z. And they say, great. And they email them a proposal 20 minutes later or the next day. There's no real discovery or diagnosis of what the client needs are. And then the sales pitch is just kind of generic. So to your question, when we go in and work with people, we say, what are the key questions you ought to be asking up front to get the information you need to win this deal, and helping document that process. So when the next salesperson comes in, whether they're super experienced or not, they've got a template, a document. Hey, when you go into that first meeting, ask these questions. Here's why you're asking these questions and the type of information. And so when you train people and give them, step-by-step documentation, that's how you can bring in less than stellar talent and really get them to produce well.
Yeah. Thanks for unpacking that. It makes total sense. In chapter 2, you talk about positioning your agency to win, and you give a great example of a Formula One team with Mercedes-Benz. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, chapter 2 is my favorite chapter in the whole book. Because I've seen this. We just had a new client. They're a $5 billion biosciences company. So obviously we're working with 2 of their specific business units. One of them did $56 million last year, just this one business unit. Their goal was 76, so they fell short. And they've doubled it for this year, even though they didn't even hit it last year. And when we started doing that diagnosis, we realized they're skipping all kinds of steps and doing a lot of things wrong. But what they do have is, as I talk about in chapter 2, they've created a winnable game for themselves. They offer some pretty unique services that they can't be found elsewhere. And the clients absolutely have to, they're working with drug companies that are developing new drugs. They have to do these certain tests and things that my client does. And so in chapter 2, I'm talking about positioning yourself in a way that makes it easy to market and sell yourself. And I used the Formula One race team example because Mercedes made a small change to their engine, which made their car faster than everybody else. So every time they enter the race, they're probably going to win. And that's kind of what I'm talking about there. How can we enter a sales race with a product or service that's so uniquely differentiated or so well positioned to your target customer that before you even open your mouth to quote sell, they're already kind of want it. And that's really what chapter 2 and that Mercedes story is all about.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And another analogy you use in the book as well is how to find the best fishing hole. So obviously before your fundamental positioning, you want to share what you've called the fishing framework. What is the fishing framework?
Yeah, the fishing framework just kind of distinguishes 4 different types of ponds you can fish in, right? Because a lot of times clients come to us and they say, hey, we want sales training. We want this, that, or the other thing. But if you're fishing in the wrong pond, it doesn't matter how great your process is or your documentation is. If there's no fish in the pond, there's no use, right? So we talk about crowded ponds. That's ponds or industries you're working in that have a lot of competition and you have no differentiation. So it's hard to fish in that kind of a pond. We also talk about on the far end, ponds that just don't have very many fish in it. I have clients that work in the traditional book publishing industry, for example, which there are pockets that are growing and digital learning and different things, but traditional book publishing is not exactly taking off like certain other industries. So their pond is kind of smaller, right? And then we talk about ponds where the fish just simply aren't hungry for what you're selling. And the example I use in the book is if you sell financial consulting services to super high net worth, 100 millionaires, billionaires, they're not searching Google for their next financial planner. So in other words, the pond doesn't exist where you can even fish. You got to belong to their country club to talk to that person, right? And then the last one is the perfect pond, right? That's a pond that's big enough to hit your goals, that has enough hungry fish in it, but the competition is not so overwhelming that you can't be successful. And so it's just a way to help you figure out if you're fishing in the right area, because if you're not, again, all the process and training, won't do you much good if you're fishing in the wrong pond.
Yeah, great. And you also talk about the different types of agencies and, what kind of agency do you want when you grow up, such as, freelance or small group. And you talk about big box agencies as well, small to medium basic ones and small to mid-sized boutique agencies as well. Why is it so important to understand what you want to be with the agency?
Well, I think it's important for several reasons, but predominantly for marketing and sales, right? If you go fishing, if you go try to generate leads and close deals, you got to have a match between the types of clients you want to work with and the services you offer and your sales messaging in the middle. That is, I look at salespeople as liaisons between clients' needs and the services that they offer. And so some people want to shop at Walmart here in America and they just want the cheapest thing. Other people wouldn't be caught dead in Walmart. And the same is true with digital marketing agencies, right? You have the big box Walmart type agencies that sell very cookie cutter, less expensive services, which may be appropriate for certain fishing ponds and certain fish. But other fish may want that boutique custom feel that you get from a custom or smaller retailer, to use the analogy. And so if you don't have that all lined up, what happens is there's a lot of inefficiency. People come in wanting a boutique experience, but you don't have one. And so by deciding who you're going to be, then you can align your marketing, your sales messaging, and your service and delivery so that you're attracting the right people that you can be successful with. And if you don't do that, you get all kinds of confusion and inefficiency with the wrong people knocking on your door.
Yeah. How do you help agencies sort of with great positioning on how to position? What's some tips or strategies you can give, small to medium boutique agencies where you help them with positioning? Sure.
Yeah, so we obviously have a pretty thorough process of research their industry, but when it comes to digital marketing agencies, there's a few shortcuts. I talk about different ways in the book, but one of the easiest shortcuts is to specialize, right? So instead of being a digital marketing agency, you can be a digital marketing agency that specializes in working with law firms, for example. So this way, if a law firm is looking for digital marketing help, they can say, well, agency A is general, agency B is general, but these guys are specialists. They must know law firms better than the other two guys. So specialization is a quick shortcut. Also, you can specialize not only in an industry, but on a service. Maybe you only do law firms and you only do SEO. So you're truly an expert at that combination. So positioning is about first you have to understand who your ideal target customers are, because you can't position in a vacuum, right? You're positioning to some specific fishing pond's needs, right? And then from there, you have to just ask, what do these people really want? What's important to them? How can I be a little bit different in terms of my value that I present to them? And so specialization is a good shortcut.
Yeah, got it. We'll come back to the book in a second and go through chapter 3, but I want to go back in time. And when you overheard one of your bosses said, how terrible you were at sales, and then fast forward to a decade later and you're sitting there at a conference next to your boss and you get that ding on your phone and you made the sale to Amazon. Talk about that sale and how that sort of unfolded.
Yeah, that was a great moment for me. It's a little egocentric, but I still loved it. Yeah, so I started, as I mentioned earlier, as a marketing strategist doing marketing, not selling marketing. And this particular boss was actually an amazing salesperson, one of the best I've ever seen to this day. And so I would go with him on sales calls because we were a small agency at the beginning. And so I wasn't really in charge of sales by any means, but I had to sometimes talk in these sales meetings. And I really just lacked confidence. I didn't see myself as a salesperson. And I really wasn't very good at it. I would sort of say the wrong things and give away too much information and all kinds of stuff. And then I left that agency and started my own with a couple of partners, as I mentioned. And after about a year or so, we lost the partner that was supposed to do sales. And so not wanting to have to go get a 9-to-5 job, I raised my hand. I said, hey, let me take a stab at sales. And through a lot of hard work and trial and error, I turned myself into a very good salesperson, at least in terms of results. And a number of years, it was about a decade after I left that I was asked to sit on a sales expert panel. And he was in the audience. I hadn't seen him since I left. And he was sitting at my table. It was like a lunch kind of thing. And I had been working on a deal to sell some SEO services to Amazon. And the deal closed while I was up on stage, and I checked my email going back to the table and was very excited. And to have that, right in front of the guy that really tore me down at the beginning was pretty enjoyable.
It was a great fuck you moment, basically.
Absolutely.
How did that sale unfold? So you sold SEO to Amazon, which is a massive contract and a massive deal. But how did that deal sort of line up, and what was the process on landing a big fish like that?
Yeah, this is a really good teaching moment. So when I say I sold SEO to Amazon, I absolutely did. But what people, it wasn't like SEO for all of Amazon, right? Amazon's huge. They have lots of different departments. So this was an SEO project and scope of work for a very specific department for a very specific use case, right? And I think a lot of times, I obviously throw that out and I put it in the book because it's impressive. But sometimes, people forget Amazon is made up of just people, right? And some of them work in departments and have plenty of budget that they can easily, say yes to without having to go to, Jeff Bezos or anybody, right? And so one thing I think is important is for younger salespeople, don't get stressed out about big names and big brands, because these are just human beings. And so how that came about actually was partly related to what we were talking about earlier with chapter 2. The agency I was representing at the time were specialists in e-commerce, digital marketing. Obviously, Amazon's pretty big in e-commerce if you haven't heard of them. And so we had a reputation due to that specialization and the content marketing being done. So they reached out to us and, heard good things from other people. And someone we had worked with before went to work at Amazon and gave us a call. And so, just kind of transpired naturally out of that specialization and doing great work.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I like that story, and I like how you sort of landed them. But you're right, specialization is the key. You can't be generic, you can't be vanilla. You need to be like a very, very sharp tip of a spear. They need to know what you do, how great you do it, and can you get the job done as well. Another little thing, going back to the book on chapter 3, you talk about the core methodology, which is authentic strategic selling. And most people think that, selling is the same as talking, but the most effective salespeople know that listening is the most important part of their jobs as well. How important is it to listen to the client, not just talking to the client?
Yeah, it's critical. One of the ways I approach sales in general is it's listening, but asking some questions around, trying to really hear where they're coming from and what their pain is. Sometimes people will come in and say something like, I need SEO. But if you ask deeper questions, if you have that diagnostic hat on and you really listen to their answers, you can often hear things behind what they're saying and get those real pain points. And then to me, a lot of selling is coming back and saying, I heard this, or I think you were really struggling with this, even though you said that, such that your presentation just hits all the buttons and they feel like no one's ever listened to them like that before.
Yeah, it's listening to understand instead of listening to respond. And one of the things you talk about in the book about selling strategically is to pinpoint and clarify the prospect's problems as they see them as well. So I guess that's building rapport too, by listening, clarifying, asking follow-up questions as well, diagnosing the root cause of the stated problem as well. Going down in there, you talk about the core methodology, which is value-based selling. How important is value-based selling in selling as an agency?
Yeah, I think it's critical in most type of B2B sales, right? Because we're trying to sell to outcomes. Nobody's trying to buy any service, whether you're a digital marketing agency or a software company or whatever. There's some outcome that the service is supposed to deliver. And so when it comes to digital marketing in particular, why does anybody buy marketing services? It's either to get more leads or sales or both, right? And so by paying attention to the ultimate outcomes that people want, which again with digital marketing is typically more money, and selling to that as opposed to what a lot of people do is they sell their scope of work. We'll do 3 blog posts a month and we'll do this and we'll do 5 of these and 3 of those. That's all irrelevant unless it leads to 5 more leads, 6 more deals, $1 million more, right? And so connecting all of what you do to those end outcomes, which are typically financially related when you're talking about digital marketing, is really critical.
Yeah. And then jumping into chapter 4, you talk about attract the leads you need. And one of the good quotes in there says, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is you don't know which half as well. Talk to us about some tips and tricks on attracting the leads that you need.
Yeah. So that actually kind of goes back to chapter 2 to a certain degree, right? And I think I use this example in the book, but I have a picture of a lump of poop, a generic brown package, and a cure for cancer. And the idea there is a lot of agencies, products or services are kind of generic. They're pretty good. They deliver to some degree, but they look and sound like most other options, right? But if you can move closer to a cure for cancer, a truly, if you had a real cure for cancer and it really worked and had minimal side effects, sales process and sales skill become less and less important, right? So, I'm sorry, what was your original question?
The question is any tips or tricks on how to sort of attract the leads that you need, yeah.
Yeah, so whether you go out and you're going to do content marketing or paid search or speed, whatever you're going to do to generate leads, if you have that, quote, cure for cancer or that unique differentiation, people start to come to you more so than you have to cold call and say, you want digital marketing, you want digital marketing, you want digital marketing. And that's what that e-commerce agency did, right? They did a great job of teaching people about e-commerce marketing through their content marketing. And people would call all the time, this is attraction, saying, hey, I read your blog post on this, that, or the other thing. Or I saw you at this trade show in your presentation. And they just, you guys are clearly the e-commerce specialists. We need some help. That's what that sounds like when it's done well, is that people are coming to you because they heard something unique from you somewhere in your marketing that attracted them to you, as opposed to cold calling and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned in your book about attracting leads versus generating leads as well, and you can do the old 100 cold calls a day and might get 1 or 2, and it's not good for your brand. But you can go on the other end, which is sales 401, which is positioning yourself to a position where customers are reaching up to you instead of you reaching down to them and asking for the business. So I guess it's a balance of the two as well. Also, do you even know what a problem is, bro? You say that in the book. It's one of the reasons people are confused to solve their sales problems is they don't clearly understand the difference between symptoms, problems, causes, and solutions. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, this relates back to something we were just talking about, but a lot of times when people call digital marketing agencies and other types of companies, they say something like, hey, we need some SEO, or they may even be a little bit more specific, like we need some link building for our SEO. And a lot of times, especially with digital marketing, because it's still somewhat new compared to lots of other industries that have been around for 100 years, people calling don't actually know what they need, right? It's just like going to the doctor and saying, hey, doc, I got a headache. The patient doesn't really know what else to say. It's up to the doctor to diagnose. And so what we want to do to be able to sell effectively and also to be able to actually help the person after they become a client is get down to that root cause. Is it really link building that's messing up your SEO? Do you even need SEO? Right? So it's asking those questions. So in that scenario, I would start with, why do you want SEO? You know, and it's always going to go back to what we just talked about. Well, I'm trying to generate more leads or sales, and I think SEO can do it. And I think link building is something. So it's really getting down to the bottom of their need and then going backwards. Is this really going to solve their problem? Is it link building? And you're supposed to be the expert, so you can assess that. And maybe they're right. Sometimes they're right. Pretty often they're either dead wrong, or what they're asking for is only part of the solution that would actually produce the outcome they want. And that's what that's all about.
Yeah, correct. It's getting down to the root cause. Is it poor execution? Is it you're just making sure that they're diagnosing before you actually give them the value that you need? Another thing you talk about in the book, you talk about three-wheeled marketing and how to identify per hour. What is the flywheel to flywheels? What's your definition of the flywheel, and why is that important?
Yeah, flywheels are important because you don't want all of your marketing to always take a ton of money and a ton of effort forever. Right. So certain things we were just talking about SEO. SEO can be an example of a flywheel where you put a lot of effort in building content, doing your keyword research, whatever you got to do. But fast forward a year later, you got your rankings and things are going pretty well. It's not like you can set it and forget it and never touch it again, but it's a flywheel. You've built up energy in the system from that work at the beginning, and it continues to pay dividends over time. Another example would be building referral partnerships. You put effort in, you make the calls, you make some deals, you get some friends in the industry, and eventually they start sending you leads. And I've had people that I've built a relationship with 10 years ago that just send me leads all the time, forever. Yeah. And there's no effort. So that's a flywheel. It becomes completely effortless or mostly effortless after the initial effort.
And the other one you talk about is a money wheel. What's the money wheel?
Yeah, money wheel is like paid search, right? Paid search can be a good lead generator for your business or sell e-commerce products, whatever the case may be. But you just have to keep putting money in forever, right? Paid search only works as long as you keep putting money back in. So that's a money wheel.
And the last one is hand cranks. What is a hand crank?
A hand crank is something that requires you to physically be present to execute, generally, like speaking. You have to physically go and do the speaking or networking or make the partnership calls. And so sometimes hand cranks can turn into flywheels. For example, you might speak, and maybe speaking is something you do for long periods of time, for years, and you just have to keep cranking. You have to keep going out and speaking, but maybe partnerships fall out of some of your speaking gigs that turn into a flywheel. But hand cranks basically relates to physical, manual participation.
Yeah, got it. Now, in the book, you talk about the story of the $50 a month marketing budget. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about that and how to create sort of a 7-figure agency starting with $50 a month.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Yeah, I call it my $50 a month marketing budget, but it was really for networking, entrance fees, and parking. So we weren't actually using it for ads or anything like that. But that was about, we had done a good job with what I talked about earlier. We had some very unique positioning. This was 15 years ago, and we were talking about doing paid advertising and conversion rate optimization to optimize those conversions on your landing page years before anybody put those together, or very few people had put those together. And so the $50 marketing budget was me going out and pounding the pavement, talking to people. I did start speaking at conferences. And again, it was just to get me in the door and have a few bucks in my pocket to pay for parking and a drink or something. And it was really me telling that unique value story, that winnable game that we had created, that got us direct deals, partnerships, invitations to speak on webinars and things like that. And so once we got some traction, then that budget became a lot bigger, and we could invest in me flying around and speaking and other forms of marketing.
Yeah, it's a great story that you put in the book as well. And obviously we won't go through all the book because it is a big book. It's 304 pages and we're only sort of up to not even halfway through. But in chapter 5, you talk about lead response that puts you in the lead, and you talk about how speed sells. So why is it so important to have speed when you talk about converting leads as well?
Yeah, well, I talk about it in two ways. At first, you got to be really fast, right? So there's studies that have been done that when you generate leads from the internet, in other words, cold, not a referral, not that someone that saw you speak or something, maybe you're doing paid search or something like that, and you're generating these leads that are coming through, hey, saw your website, want to talk to you about your paid search services or whatever you sell. That's a cold lead at that point. And so the research shows that that person is probably filling out forms on 3 or 4 or 5 other websites. And if you get back to them super quickly, like literally within 5 minutes of the lead coming in, when you can, it really dazzles people because other agencies probably aren't doing that. And so speed at the beginning gets you far more contacts with your leads while they're hot and warm, and it impresses them, and it kind of tells the story that, hey, these guys are responsive. If they were this responsive up front, they'll probably be responsive to my needs once I become a client. So speed in lead response is critical to getting more actual appointments and closing more deals. But on the back end, when you get into the sales process, you sometimes need to slow down a little bit to do that good listening that we were talking about earlier. So there are times to go fast and times to go slow.
Yeah, and in chapter 6, you deep dive into it, whereas diagnosing the root causes. And you have a great quote in the book by Bruce Lee, which says, a wise man can learn more from a foolish question than a fool can learn from a wise answer. And you talk about the importance of, after executing a diagnosis call, you have to sort of slow it down. So talk to us about the importance of a good discovery call, aka diagnosis call.
Yeah, I use discovery and diagnosis interchangeably, but again, a lot of agencies, especially on the smaller side, they tend to just do a very quick call. Oh, you want SEO and link building? We do that. Cool, let me get you a proposal. And then they just email out the proposal, right? I mean, imagine if a doctor did that to a patient. Oh, your head hurts and you think you have strep throat? Here's your medicine. No. We got to slow down, ask some questions, dig in, because that's how we're going to have a better chance of selling and closing the deal, but also in actually making the client happy. Because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times people call in and ask for stuff that is just literally not what they need, or only a little piece of what they need. So we want to be a good doctor. We want to dig in. We want to get to the roots. We want to understand the whole picture, so that when we come back with a presentation, we can say, hey, I know you called about this. Let me tell you why you need this, that, and the other thing to truly produce the outcome. And so that diagnosis process and having some standard questions that you're going to ask to make sure you get the information you need to really deliver the right prescription and sales pitch is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and then after that, you talk about prescribing strategic solutions, and you have a good analogy about golf. You're a bit of a golf nut, and talk to me about prescribing strategic solutions and how that ties into golf with your son. Yeah,
so strategic solutions, I think I talk about in the book a strategic solution sketch. So on that first or second discovery call, we're not doing the full pitch, right? We haven't gone into the lab and done the x-rays and the MRIs to actually have the full prescription. But even in that first discovery call, you can really set yourself apart and establish yourself as a trusted advisor by sketching out a solution. Hey, what I'm hearing is this. I think we might need to do a little bit more of this. Let me and the team go dig. And that's the sales engineering process that kind of relates to that golf analogy, which I'll get to in a minute. But by sketching that out, which requires you to have product knowledge, you have to understand what you're selling. That's also very important. You can start to set yourself up as, wow, this guy seems to be more of a business consultant and seems to know what he's talking about. Then the sales engineering process, that's where we're going to dig in and really, again, like, the doctor may say, hey, I felt your leg and I think your ACL may be off, but we need to go do an MRI. And that's where you come back with that strategic solution sketch. And by doing the sales engineering, you're going to make sure that you're bringing on clients that you have a really good chance of doing a good job for because you actually dug in. And creating a sales pitch that's really going to resonate at a deeper level than just doing a quick generic proposal. And I think the analogy to golf that I use in there is walking while playing golf versus riding in a cart. Riding a cart's easier. Sales engineering, as I just described, it can take a lot more work, which is like walking when playing golf. But when I walk, when I play golf, I get more exercise. I don't have to go to the gym. And so the analogy in the book is that sometimes doing what seems like the harder thing, taking more time in the sales process to do your sales engineering, can actually pay major dividends, not only in closing more deals, but making sure that the scope of work is appropriate for the client. And just like walking in golf, you can get a lot more benefits than you can just by taking the easy, lazy way and riding in a cart.
Absolutely, yeah. And the book is filled with so much more as well. So just to touch on some of the chapters, what we won't touch on as well. So for people listening to this, and if you're in the digital marketing space or if you're a business owner or even in sales, this book is perfectly for you. You go through how to create presentations that wow and win. You talk about, the perfect pitch as well, tracking tools, templates, and automation. So for people out there listening, where can they find the book? Or you also mentioned you're giving away a couple of free chapters as well. Where can they access this?
Yeah, so obviously you can get it on Amazon. It's Clone the Ace. You can go buy one. If you want the free chapters, it's the beginning all the way through chapter 2, which, as I said, is super valuable just by itself. You can go to our website, solvesales.com. It's like solve a problem, solvesales.com. And if you just click on the book page right under the picture of the book on the left side, there's a little form. You can get the free chapters at the beginning of the book.
Yeah, awesome. And where do you spend most of your time online yourself? So if people want to connect with you personally, if people want to, if they're a small, medium, boutique, whatever agency and want to work with you, how can people contact you for more information?
Sure. Well, obviously you can go to the website. You can email me directly, Forrest, Forrest, at solvesales.com. I'm also relatively active on LinkedIn. So those would be the 3 best places to get in touch with me.
And who are some of the authors or books that you've read in your early days that sort of started you on this career? Is there any highlights or any favorite authors or books that you recommend to others in the sales game?
Specific to sales?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the 2 that stand out were Spin Selling by Neil Rackham, which I still love to this day. And that really taught me the importance of asking good questions. And the other one that stands out is A Little Red Book of Selling by Jeffrey Gitmer. I feel like both of those have some really great insights. And The Little Red Book of Selling in particular has a lot of very specific things you can do, which is kind of how I tried to write my book. It's very meat and potatoes. It's very do this. Let me show you an example. It's not just highfalutin theories. It's very meat and potatoes type of information.
Yeah, your book reminded me of Spin Selling a lot as well. So it was well put together. But yeah, it works. And if you follow the formula and you follow what other successful people do as well, as Tony Robbins says, if you want success, just follow what other successful people do and follow the path. There's no use of going through the forest with a machete. Just walk the path that's already been made. Sometimes in life we just need someone a couple of chapters ahead of us, and authors like yourself that put together fantastic books like this too. So thank you for your work and thank you for putting it all together as well. And yeah, it's a fantastic book. So for my audience out there listening, go out there, purchase his book. You're going to get a lot out of it. So if you're in sales or a business owner, you definitely need this particular book. Now, another thing, Forrest, if you would have sort of a dinner party with three people, dead or alive, from the past, famous, who would they be? Where would you take them, or what would you serve them? So three people, dinner party, you're hosting. Who are they?
All together?
All together.
Let's see. The first two that come to mind are Elon Musk. I just think his vision and I just think he's an amazing business person from a insight standpoint. So I'd love to meet him. Another one that maybe some people have heard of, a lot of people probably haven't, is Osho. He's probably more popular now through his Wild Wild Country documentary.
He's actually my guru before that even came out. So I've read all his. I've not read. He's done 650 books. He's read over 100,000 books. A lot of people don't know the Wild Wild West. The Wild Wild Country, which was the Netflix documentary, is not a propaganda thing, because it doesn't go into his teachings. It just goes into the story of Oregon. So yeah, we could have a whole podcast on this as well. Yeah. I'm actually reading the book about Sheila called Don't Kill Him. So that's a very interesting insight to who he was as a person. But yeah, we can talk about that offline. But who is the other one? So Elon, Osho, and?
Who's the other one?
You got me wound up now on Osho.
Yeah, I've read probably 30, 40 of his books.
Wow.
Who was the other one? Probably, and only because you just mentioned it, and my wife just took a course with him last week. Tony Robbins, I think, would be actually pretty interesting to meet with. He seems like a very interesting and effective human.
That would actually be a really good conversation. So Elon being Elon, Osho being Osho, and then Tony being Tony. Three different energies. Where would you take him, or what would you serve him? Or would you have him at home, or would you take him out?
I would probably take him to Osho's International Meditation Retreat, which I been to.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool. Now, we appreciate you, Forrest, for all the work you've done. And is there any other works or projects or books coming out in the future, or what are you sort of working on at the moment?
Yeah, I do plan on creating some new books. I think I'm gonna probably write a shorter book. The Clone the Ace is great for lots of different people, but it's very specifically written for digital marketing agencies. All of the examples are digital marketing specific. And again, other kinds of consultants can certainly get stuff out of it. But I think I'm going to write a more B2B manifesto, B2B sales manifesto that borrows a lot from Clone the Ace, but is a little bit broader and a little bit more specific to some of the principles we've developed since I finished writing the book.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to that, and thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of the year. And again, people out there, go out, purchase the book, and connect with Forrest as well. So thank you for being a guest on the Best Book Bits podcast, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Michael.
No worries. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.